It was a sound that did not belong in the natural world, a mechanical roar that tore through the very fabric of human sanity. If you were not there, in the suffocating mud of Luzon on that February morning in 1945, you cannot possibly imagine. What happens when four heavy machine guns are fired in perfect synchronization? It was not the rhythmic rat-a-tat of Hollywood movies. It was a continuous, low-frequency thunder, a sound often described by the men who heard it as the tearing of a gigantic canvas. By the hands of an angry god, it was the sound of the atmosphere itself being ripped apart on February 9th in the pre-dawn darkness. That sound became the last thing an entire company of Japanese soldiers would ever hear in less than 90 seconds. 7,000 rounds of .50 caliber, armor-piercing incendiary ammunition would transform a jungle clearing into one of the most gruesome slaughterhouses of the Pacific War. When the smoke finally cleared, the survivors on both sides would realize that this was no longer war as they knew it, it was an industrial execution. Rewind the clock 48 hours. It is 600 hours, February 8th, 1945. The air humidity is hovering near 90%, making every breath feel like swallowing warm, wet cotton. Sergeant Joe Mason, a 24-year-old squad leader in the 5th Marines, is curled up behind the cold steel armor of his M16 half-track. His eyes are bloodshot, the result of 2 consecutive nights without sleep. As he stares through a haze of rotting vegetation and cordite smoke at a muddy clearing 400 yards away. For Mason, this 16-ton vehicle is both his fortress and his cage. Looming above him is the weapon that has made him the most popular and the most targeted man in the sector, the Maxim M45 electric turret, mounting 4.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. At this range, those for black barrels look like the unblinking eyes of death itself. The situation here on Luzon has deteriorated into a brutal stalemate. Since the American landings at Lingayen Gulf on January 9th, the Marines have not been fighting a retreating enemy, but a phantom army. The dense canopy neutralizes American air superiority, while the steep ridges and ancient cave systems have been turned into impregnable fortresses. The Japanese emerging from these holes are not fighting to survive, they are fighting to die, launching terrifying Banzai charges under the cover of darkness. Just 2 days before Mason arrived, such a charge had torn through Fox Company. The next night, Easy Company was overrun in a chaotic melee of bayonets and grenades. 14 Marines died in that darkness, including 2 machine gunners who were hacked down by wielding officers when their weapons jammed from overheating. The battalion commander had called Mason to his tent the previous night. The atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with cigarette smoke and desperation. The commander looked at Mason with the cold, exhausted eyes of a man watching his unit bleed out. "Sergeant," he said, "my men are dying faster than malaria can take them. The Japanese do not care about casualties. They feed on the chaos of the charge. I need something that acts like a wall. I do not care that your rig was built to shoot down planes. I want you to drive it to the front and point it at the jungle." It was a gamble. Mason remembered the skepticism. Back at Camp Pendleton in California, tankers would knock on the armor of the strange-looking half-track and ask, "Hey Mason, is this thing for tanks or planes? You planning to swat flies with a sledgehammer?" The M16 multiple-gun motor Carriage was, by design, an anti-aircraft weapon. Its electric motors could spin the turret at lightning speed to track a Zero fighter, diving at 300 miles per hour. To use such a weapon against infantry was considered by military doctrine to be a waste of resources. Even Mason's company commander, Captain Morris, had initially ordered him to conserve ammunition for air raids. But Mason, a veteran of 2 years of island hopping, knew the threat was not coming from the sky. In the dead of night, he and his crew disobeyed orders, stripping out the standard ball ammunition and loading every belt with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. The API, Mason knew the physics of his weapon. A single .50 caliber bullet leaves the barrel at 2,900 feet per second. It does not just punch a hole, it exerts enough kinetic energy to detach a limb or shatter a torso. Now, imagine 4 of them, hitting the same target simultaneously. Dawn, February 9th. The silence of the jungle is heavier than the shelling. It is the silence of a held breath. Mason leans against the vibrating armor of the half-track, the engine idling, sending a tremor through his spine. He holds a cup of cold coffee, his hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of anticipation. This vehicle had only arrived 12 hours ago, escorted by the Red Ball Express convoy. Through to ambushes, the crew had spent the entire night modifying it for ground combat. Technical manuals explained how to lead a bomber at 5,000 feet, but they said nothing about how to aim at a screaming human being charging through mud. At 300 yards, Corporal Frank Amis, the gunner, sits exposed in the open turret. He has wrapped extra ammo belts around the bath above the mountain stacks and bags along the vehicle flank, turning the high-tech anti-aircraft platform into a gritty pillbox. At 5:45, the warning comes. Not a radio call, but the distinct, terrifying whistle of incoming. Male, Japanese 75mm mountain guns, likely hidden in a ridge cave, open up. 6 shells slam into the trees. Behind them, shrapnel pinging off the half-track armor like hail, the smell of high explosives in splintered teak floods. The air. It is a classic Japanese tactic, a short, violent barrage to pin the Americans down, followed immediately by the infantry rush to close the distance before the defenders can recover. At 5:52, as the artillery shifts to the rear, the first shadows detach themselves from the jungle line. Mason counts 40 men through his vision slit, but he knows there are hundreds more behind them. These are not the fresh conscripts they faced on the beaches. Through his binoculars, he sees uniforms rotted by weeks of living in holes, covered in red volcanic clay. These are veterans, men who have lived like animals, and are now prepared to die like martyrs. In the center of the line, a Japanese officer, Lieutenant Yamamoto, draws his sword. Even at this distance, the glint of the blade is visible. He raises it high, screaming an order that is instantly swallowed by the collective roar of 60 throats, the Banzai war cry. It is a sound of rage and despair, terrifying in its raw humanity. But this is not a disorganized mob. They advance in a skirmish line, spaced 10 yards apart, moving with the disciplined trot of seasoned infantry. They are heading straight for the weak point in the line, the same spot where they had overrun the water. Cooled machine guns to nights prior, Mason radio crackles with the panicked voice of a forward observer, Charlie 6. This is Lima 1. Enemy infantry in the open. 60 plus. Wait, more in the trees. Repeat, more in the trees. The line goes dead as a mortar round severs the wire. Now, Mason whispers. Corporal Thomas stomps on the foot pedal, and the electric turret whines, spinning the 4 heavy barrels toward the oncoming wave, the fire control system, designed to track the smooth arc of an aircraft, is now being forced to track the erratic movement of men stumbling over roots and craters. But Thomas has the touch. He settles the crosshairs on the center of the mass. Open fire. Thomas depresses both butterfly riggers. The world stops, then explodes. 2 streams of red tracers, 4 barrels firing a combined 4,800 rounds per minute, slam into the Japanese line. The muzzle flash is so intense it acts like a strobe light, illuminating the clearing. In jerky, horrific flashes, the noise is deafening, a physical pressure that hammers against the chest. The effect down range is immediate and catastrophic. The physics of the .50 caliber round against soft targets is gruesome. The first wave of Japanese soldiers does not just fall, they disintegrate. Men hit by the quad stream of incendiary rounds are blown apart, a pink mist of vaporized blood hanging in the humid air. The dispersed formation, designed to minimize Casualties from artillery is useless against a weapon that sweeps across the field like a scythe. It is like watching a heavy wind knock down wheat. Lieutenant Yamamoto makes it 10 seconds. A burst of fire catches him in the midsection. A kinetic energy lifting him off his feet and throwing him 20 yards backward into the undergrowth. His sword spins through the air, reflecting the muzzle flashes before vanishing into the dark. Behind him, the charge falters. Soldiers try to turn, to run, but the electric turret traverses faster than any human can sprint. Thomas is methodical, sweeping the fire left to right, then right to left, hosing down the vegetation until nothing moves. Until the only thing rising from the field is smoke and the smell of burnt cordite. 90 seconds. That is all it took. The M16 has expended over 7,000 rounds. The barrels are smoking, glowing a dull reed in the dawn light. Mason ears are ringing, a tinnitus that will stay with him for days. He realizes with a cold detachment. He has not just witnessed a battle, he has witnessed the end of an era. The age of the warrior spirit has just been crushed by the age of the machine. The news of the slaughter spreads through the Japanese lines like a virus. To the Japanese soldier, indoctrinated in Bushido, death in battle is honorable, but there is no honor in this. Survivors crawling back to their holes speak of a thunder god, an iron demon that breathes fire, and erases men from existence. Sergeant Major Hayoshi, a 20-year veteran, receives a report. At 7:30 from a private whose arm hangs by a thread of skin, the soldier is delirious, babbling about a weapon that turns men into mist. Hayoshi sees a fear in the boy's eyes that he has never seen before. Not the fear of death, but the fear of total, meaningless annihilation. By noon, reports pile up. In the cave command post of Colonel Yamada, his staff, hardened veterans of Guadalcanal, cannot comprehend the intel. How can one vehicle possess the firepower of an entire heavy weapons company? The realization dawns slowly. The Americans have changed the rules. They are not fighting man to man, they are fighting with mobile industrial plants. The Japanese tactic of luring Americans into close-range ambushes is now obsolete because you cannot get close. You are shredded before you can even see the enemy. The psychological impact is devastating. Morale, the glue holding the starving Japanese garrison together, begins to dissolve. Deserters slip away. Into the night, officers find their orders ignored. On February 11th, the nightmare becomes tangible. Soldiers wake up screaming, haunted by the sound of the quad 50s, even in their sleep. The specific, low-frequency thrum of the M16 engines becomes a Pavlovian trigger for panic. When a patrol hears that sound, they do not dig and they run. On February 14th, the impossible happens. A group of 37 Japanese soldiers emerges from a cave complex that had been suppressed by an M16. For 72 hours, they are not carrying weapons. They are carrying white flags made from torn undershirts. These men, who weeks ago would have blown themselves up rather than surrender, walk into the Marine lines. Their platoon leader, a decorated veteran, tells the interrogators through a translator. Resistance against that machine is suicide. It is not war, it is cleaning. The end comes at Hill to 12, the last organized stronghold. It is a honeycomb of volcanic caves. Defended by Colonel Yamada and 300 diehards, standard artillery hammers the hill for 20 minutes, with little effect. Then the M16s roll up. This time they are not defensive, under the cover of smoke. 3 half-tracks claw their way up the goat trails, their tracks grinding on the loose rock. At 7:15, they open up directly into the cave mouth. Thousands of incendiary rounds pour into the dark openings. They tear through sandbags, ricochet off the rock walls, and ignite the ammunition caches stored deep inside. Secondary explosions rock the hill, belching fire and smoke from the tunnel entrances. The Japanese inside are trapped in a ricochet chamber of flying leaden fire. They cannot return fire, they cannot hide. At 800 hours, the firing stops. The surviving defenders of Hill to 12 stumble out, hands in the air, coughing up black smoke. Colonel Yamada is found dead in his common post, having committed ritual suicide. Rather than face the shame of being defeated by a machine, he could not fight. As the prisoners are marched down the hill, Sergeant Joe Mason leans against the hot armor of his vehicle. His hands are cramped from the vibration of the turret. He watches the enemy, stripped of their pride. And he knows that the world has changed. In the jungle of Luzon, the cold, brutal efficiency of American industry has finally broken the back of the samurai code. Courage, tactics, and sacrifice, none of it mattered. In the face of 2,400 rounds per minute, the meat chopper had done its work. If you want more heavy metal history breakdowns, destroy that like button and subscribe to the channel. I am your strategy observer. The battlefield is clear, but history never sleeps. I will see you on the next front.